Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 5th of October 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. The game in the background is once again Blacklight. Shaking off that rust, man, shaking off the rust. First email comes in from Slick that says, recently we've seen a huge surge in iOS and Android games. It would be fair to say that mobile gaming is an increasingly popular thing. I know of people who've forked out hundreds of pounds just to play Plants vs. Zombies and other similar games on the latest phone or tablet. Taking this into account, why is it that the PS Vita failed so horribly, particularly so in the Western market? Following the popularity of handhelds like the Game Boy and the fact that mobile gaming is all the rage currently, it seems strange to me that the Vita would sell as badly as it seemed to. I came to the conclusion that it was the price, yet the price of tablets and phones caps the £500 mark quite easily. That doesn't even seem to be the case either. Well, the problem is that, yes, phones do cost more than that, but only if you actually buy them on their own. Phones don't actually cost that much if you get them with a plan, and that's how a lot of people get their phones. They get on a 2-year contract, they're essentially paying for their service and their phone over the course of 2 years. So most people don't buy phones SIM-less. I think the last phone that I bought, the HTC Desire Z, I did buy SIM-less because my provider in the UK did not have that phone in stock. They weren't going to stock it either. They just said, well, there's not enough demand for the keyboard version, so I just bought it myself, and yeah, that cost me a lot of money, but I got the phone that I wanted. iPads, yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, you don't generally get a tablet with a phone plan. I think it's possible to do that now, but still, you're going to pay through your nose for these bloody things. But here's the thing, these are used for so many other uses. If I were to look at my usage for my iPad, I think the most of it is probably internet browsing or viewing of media when I've not been at home. Now you could argue, but you could do that on the PS Vita. Yes, you're right, but that's not the perception, is it? It's perceived as a handheld gaming console as opposed to something that can actually give you other useful things. And yes, the use of a Vita is undoubtedly more limited than an iPad. You can get hundreds of thousands of useful apps for all manner of different things on an iPad, and you can't get that on a PS Vita. In fact, the app support for a PS Vita is far lower than any of the major OSs, including, of course, the Windows Phone, which, you know, it's pretty hard to be behind the Windows Phone, and also Android devices. So it is unquestionably of more limited use, and it also costs quite a bit, not to mention the fact that games for the Vita are very expensive. Now, up until this point, that hasn't actually been that much of a problem, but over the last few years, we've really seen a massive surge in mobile gaming that is a hell of a lot cheaper. Yes, you have to pay a lot for the device initially, but actual games on an iPhone or even an iPad, which is usually more expensive, still miles cheaper than anything you get on a Vita. You're paying $40 or more like £30 to £40 a game. If I go on Amazon.co.uk right now, I will see that the price of Uncharted Golden Abyss, which was a launch title, is £34.10. If you need the equivalent for that, that's $55.21. You know how many iPad games I get for that price? Well, quite a lot. Most likely 55 of them. And the question is, what am I going to have more fun with? I'm pretty sure Penny Arcade said this at one point, actually, in a comic. Am I going to have more fun with 55.99 iPad games, or am I going to have more fun with Uncharted Golden Abyss? And you might say, oh, quality over quantity. That's a really hard argument to make when it's such a massive, massive divide between the number of Vita games you can have versus the number of iPad games you can have. I'm well aware there's a lot of trash on the iPad, but I've got to say there's quite a bit of trash on the Vita as well. There are a number of titles which really do not live up to their expectation, and I have a feeling that we are shifting away from this idea of portable gaming on a dedicated device. And you know what? I actually don't mind that much as long as we continue to get this kind of quality. Now, for all the Vita's problems, it is a really nice system, and it does have some very, very good games on it. Performance-wise, it will easily crush an iPhone. There's no real question about that. But if you were to take it and then have a look at some iPad games, there are some that you could say have equal graphical fidelity. Although, for the most part, they are very, very limited. You look at stuff like Infinity Blade, which is held up as the gold standard of iPad graphics. And yet, that is a very limited game in what it actually offers. It's almost a game full of QuickTime events, really. It's like the Dragon's Lair of the iPad. As impressive as it looks, it's not really much of a game. The Vita currently doesn't have the killer apps that it needs in order to be successful, and I think a lot of people are holding off on buying it as a direct result of that. Even then, though, even then, you've got to think, well, when do I really need a portable gaming device? And do I really need to buy a dedicated portable gaming device, especially one that's that bulky? Do I require that in my life? Because I am moving away from the idea that I do. I love my Vita, and I have a 3DS XL, and they're both great machines, no question, and they both have some good games on them, but I find myself playing them less, and less. If I want a so-called real gaming experience, I will play on my console, or I will play on my PC. It's hard for me to justify carting yet another device around when my iPad will do so much. I can watch my movies, I can read ebooks, I can browse the internet effectively and comfortably. You can do it on a Vita as well, but it's a way more pleasurable experience on an iPad. There's really no argument there. I'll have access to a ton of apps that are very useful to me, and I have access to games as well. Sure, they might be more limited, but at the end of the day, I am not so concerned about having serious gaming experiences while I'm on a plane in mortal terror for my life. I'd rather just play something simple where my brain doesn't have to work. I have to wonder if the time for AAA releases, at least in its current price point and form, has actually passed in the mobile space, and I think we'll be seeing that over the next few years. And we will find out whether the PS Vita and the Nintendo 3DS are able to compete within an increasingly mobile market. This email comes in from Anon that says, "This afternoon I read a thread on the PS2 beta forums regarding the optional subscription and the fact that subscribers would have priority over non-subs in the login queue. The OP was claiming it was unfair to be able to jump the queue, while others said it was perfectly reasonable, some even going so far as to call free players second-class citizens. I wondered what you made of this in relation to SOEs. If you want to pay, it is on your terms policy." Well, this I am not liking. Not for the reason that the person in question complained about, though. I think the priority login is absolutely fine, and this is very, very common amongst free-to-play titles, particularly MMOs. If you pay, you get priority login. That's fine. If you don't pay, then you are being subsidized by the people that do, and you have to wait. Here's the problem, though. The system that they're describing is a subscription-based model, and it is giving a number of benefits, including that. The odd thing with this is that you create 3 tiers of player here, not 2. We're not talking about second class, we're actually talking about third class here. The first class of player, the cream of the crop, are the guys that subscribe. They get 25 to 50% increased resource, XP gain, and passive cert point gain. And that's going to start at 25 and increase 5% every month over sustained membership. Priority login queue, early access to new cosmetic items in the store, which is great, that's a really good idea, as long as it's not early access to weapons, and 500 station cash every month. Then you have the second class. Now, the second class is a guy that's willing to pay, but doesn't want to subscribe every month. They don't really want to give $15 a month to the game. Maybe they'll pay 10, hell, maybe in some months they end up paying 20. They pay more than the subscription price just because they happen to want certain things. And that guy is your paying free-to-play customer. He's the guy that's subsidizing all of the freeloaders. That's how the free-to-play model works. They know the majority of people won't actually pay money, but they are subsidized by the people that do. And this is vital to the infrastructure of the game, and also vital, of course, to the fact that the company needs to stay afloat and keep the lights on in the office. Now, this guy is actually being punished the hardest, because he doesn't get any of that stuff. He doesn't get the increased resource gain, XP gain, passive cert point gain, priority login queue, early access, and 500 station cash every month. No, indeed. But he does just get the items that he purchased. And then you've got the freeloader, who doesn't get any of this stuff, but doesn't have to pay any money either. So you create this very odd 3-class system rather than 2, and I think that that is unhealthy. I don't think you should ever devalue or inadvertently punish a player that decides they want to take on the free-to-play title on their own terms, because that is the nature of free-to-play games. You are supposed to be able to pay as you want when you want, and that pay-as-you-go model is potentially very consumer-friendly. So why would you railroad that with a subscription-based system that gives so many benefits? I think that, honestly, you would have to give the same benefits to somebody that paid maybe upwards of that, and maybe you could then stratify it in such a way that if you paid $5, let's just say you paid $5 in a month, and the system tracked that and then gave you a reward bonus that month on that basis. Maybe you gained access to the priority login queue if you'd spent more than $5. Maybe you get increased resource gain and increased XP gain on that basis. Maybe that could work. But by no means do you want to hit the middle class so hard in this situation, and that's not a deliberate election allegory, but you are hitting the middle class of player here. You are benefiting the upper class the most, the lower class the least, which is fine because they still get all their stuff for free. But then the middle class is getting hit and said, we don't care about you guys because you are not willing to pay $15 a month, even though you might spend more than that in a specific month. So I think that's something they need to reevaluate. On the subject of the actual login queue, I don't view that as important. I think that's totally fine. I am not so keen on this idea of 50% increased resource gain. And the reason I'm not keen on that is because that does give you a moment-to-moment advantage within the game. Those of you who don't know, resources can be quite scarce in PlanetSide 2. So if you keep crashing your aircraft, then you're not going to have an aircraft anymore. You can't keep respawning it. Now, if you happen to be a player that has 50% increased resource gain, you're going to get more Reavers, more Mosquitoes, more tanks out than your average player, which does give you an advantage. A normal trooper versus a tank is obviously going to be in pretty dire straits, so you're going to have a higher kill-death ratio, you're going to end up with more experience in the long run as a direct result. So I am a little worried about that, especially since it's such a massive increase, like up to 50%. That's pretty damn significant. So I am a little concerned there that we are approaching the point where that could be considered pay to win, and that I'm not happy about. I don't care how much I like PlanetSide 2. That, I think, is really asking for it. That is asking for trouble and creating some really potent advantages for paying when you said that that was something you were trying to avoid, and indeed it is something you should avoid in first-person shooters. There is a difference between jumping the queue, whether it be in progression, from accelerated progression, accelerated unlocks, and just flat out giving you moment-to-moment advantages. And it might not seem that way, but I would say that increased resource gain in that form actually does give you a moment-to-moment advantage over the course of your gameplay session, just because you can roll more tanks, more Reavers, more Mozzies, and you can do more damage like that, whereas other players would be more limited in the number of vehicles they can actually bring out. So I think they need to be a little cautious with this, to say the least, and hopefully that is something that they might end up revising once again as we continue through the beta. They have shown they've been very receptive to feedback, so let's see where it goes. Alright, we've got time for one quick one. The question is simply, would you prefer that 2 less polished but more niche games were made with the money that is instead put into highly polished mainstream games which are designed for the widest audience possible? Well, obviously I would, because I'm not really concerned about mainstream gaming all that much. Mainstream FPS is not something I find particularly interesting. Third-person shooters, once again, hey, more chest-high walls, roadie runs, and cover nonsense. I don't care about dancing games, I don't care about singing games, and I do not care, quite frankly, about sports franchises. So obviously I would, and I think a lot of core gamers would certainly prefer more niche titles, but it really isn't down to that, because where does the money come from in the first place? Yes, I would love that a space sim and a real-time strategy could come out of this. That would be great, wouldn't it? You know, let's take a $100 million budget and let's see what we can make with 2 sets of 50 million. We could make some amazing space sims and some absolutely astonishing real-time strategies with that kind of money. But we won't, because that money comes from the publisher in the first place, and that money is only given on the condition that a game is made that's actually going to make them that money back. Publishers are willing to take risks in some situations, but they're not going to pour 50 million into a space sim, because it's not going to make the money back. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter how much money you pour into that niche and that genre, there are simply not enough people interested to make that amount of money back. The very notion is ludicrous. Think about how many copies of that game that you'd actually have to sell in order to make that work out. It's mind-boggling. There are situations where publishers will take a budget and then split it up, and they will create some smaller games with it. And these can be niche. This is the thing. They're looking to create smaller games with far, far less budget. Let's not talk about splitting up a big budget into 2. That doesn't happen, at least as far as I'm aware. I don't see any instances of that really happening. It's not like you could take Call of Duty's budget, split it in 2, and then make 2 titles that'll actually make the money back. No, because the brand is far too powerful. Call of Duty is a safe bet. It will make the money back. They know this. Whereas they do not know that the 2 new titles that they made that are fairly niche using that budget would even get anywhere close, and I can safely say they probably wouldn't. But you can take a small budget, split it up even further and say, alright, let's make some small games, let's make some mobile games, let's make some games for Xbox Live Arcade. And that does happen. You do see those games come out from major publishers, and they're often pretty good. Some of them are niche, Most of them aren't, unfortunately, but there may come a time when that happens. The thing is that the traditional publisher model really doesn't lend itself well to that. A shame, isn't it? Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. I shall see you next time.